Today, we're diving into something pretty mysterious and, honestly, a little alarming. It's about millions of people in India who are, well, disappearing. Not in the literal sense, but from the country's voter lists. And this isn't just a simple mix-up. It's a systemic problem that really gets to the heart of what democracy is all about. So let's figure out what's really going on here.
Just take a second and really think about that. What if you went to check your voter registration, something you've had for years, and your name just wasn't there anymore? Poof, gone. That fundamental right you have to help shape your country's future has just vanished, and you have no idea why.
And look, this isn't some hypothetical thought experiment. For millions of people across India, this is their reality. Their names are being quietly wiped from the rolls through a quiet, bureaucratic process.
Yeah, we're not talking about a few thousand names here and there because of clerical errors. We're talking about a massive, widespread issue. Names are being removed without any big announcement, leaving millions of otherwise eligible citizens completely disenfranchised. The big question is, how? How is this even happening?
Well, the answer lies in a pretty complicated administrative process. It's called the Special Intensive Revision, or SIR for short. And you need to understand this because it completely changes the game when it comes to your right to vote.
So this is a huge shift. You see, in the past, the system was mostly about adding new voters and updating records. But now, under this SIR process, the responsibility falls on you, the voter, to actively prove you belong on that list. And if there's any doubt about your details, you could be removed.
I mean, look at how stark this change is. It used to be the state's job to make sure the voter lists were up to date and accurate. Now, that whole burden of proof has been flipped upside down. It's on you, the individual citizen, to prove that you still exist as a voter.
So, what happened when they actually implemented this new process? Well, the results were staggering. This wasn't just some minor spring cleaning of the voter rolls. This was a mass deletion event. Just take Tamil Nadu, for example. Over 9.7 million names were deleted. Let that sink in. That's nearly 15% of the state's entire voting population, just gone from the list in one go. That number is just incredible.
And this wasn't just a one-off. Nope. In West Bengal, more than 5.8 million names were taken off the rolls. That's about 7.5% of their voters. You start to see a pattern here. This was happening on a massive scale.
Now, officially, the government gave all these very technical-sounding reasons for the deletions. Things like, unmapped forms or doubtful linkages. But all this bureaucratic jargon, it kind of hides what's really going on.
And that brings us to the central, unanswered question in all of this. We have these giant numbers of people being deleted, but what we don't have is the data. We don't know the gender, the class, or the backgrounds of the people who've been removed. Who are they?
This is where we get to the human side of the story. Because for those millions of people who suddenly found out their names were gone, it kicked off a frantic race against the clock.
The pressure was just immense. Voters had only 53 days, less than 2 months, to somehow find out their name was deleted, gather all the right documents, file an official objection, and show up in person before an official. For almost anyone, that's an incredibly short amount of time.
And it wasn't easy. The paperwork they were asking for was often really complex. Sometimes people even had to produce proof of their parents' birth. For a huge number of people in India, finding those kinds of historical records is next to impossible.
So who gets hit the hardest by a system like this? Well, it's pretty much always the most vulnerable. We're talking about migrant workers who are away from home, women who move and change their names after marriage, the elderly, and basically anyone who doesn't have a neat and tidy paper trail. They're the first ones to fall through the cracks. The situation in Bihar is a really stark example of this. The Supreme Court actually had to step in just to get officials to accept the Aadhaar card as a valid ID. But even with that, 6.8 million names were still deleted. And here's the crucial part. The data showed a sharp drop in the ratio of female voters, which heavily suggests that women were hit disproportionately hard by this whole process. So, as you can see, this goes way beyond being just an administrative headache. It starts to raise these huge fundamental questions about what it really means to be a voter and how a democracy should even work. Even the Supreme Court has recognized the immense pressure this whole thing creates. They've urged officials to be more, sympathetic to the real-world challenges people face. But a little bit of guidance isn't the same as a real solution.
And that leaves this massive constitutional question just hanging in the air.
is a system that basically presumes you're an invalid voter until you can prove otherwise. Is that actually in line with democratic principles? The courts haven't really given a final answer on that one yet.
And that really is the heart of it, isn't it? I mean, the goal of a healthy democracy should be to include as many eligible people as possible. Any system that quietly and efficiently removes eligible citizens, even if it's unintentional, poses a really serious risk. But here's the thing, there's a much better way to do this. Instead of putting all the pressure on individuals, the system could use its own existing government records to verify people automatically. It could give people longer, more flexible deadlines. It could create special protections for vulnerable groups. And it could be totally transparent about who's being removed and why. Ultimately, this whole crisis forces us all to ask a really basic question about our rights. Is your right to vote a fundamental guarantee that the state has a duty to protect? Or is it more like a conditional privilege, one that you have to constantly fight to prove you deserve? The answer to that question is going to define the future of democracy for millions.